Hello and welcome to my review of the Windlass Steelcraft's 17th century Italian rapier and Musketeer Gauche. Both these items were purchased for display, so neither one has been sharpened and neither of them have been subjected to any types of cutting tests. So I really won't be talking about them at all during the review. Let's start with the 17th century rapier. In doing my research before I purchased this rapier and preparing a little bit more for this review, I do find the whole subject area of rapiers to be a little bit confusing. There's a lot of opinion and controversy over what a rapier was designed for, how it was used, where it was used, how it developed over time, etc. I think a few things we can say that have a little bit less controversy as it relates to a rapier is that it was an item or a sword that was in its prime during the 16th and 17th century, that it is a single-handed weapon used with one hand, that it had a long, straight blade, that it could cut, but it was primarily used as a thrusting weapon. The guard provided good protection and could be quite complex. It could have been used on the battlefield and probably was, but it was primarily designed as a gentleman's sword and was used for protection and for show. There were numerous teaching styles or schools in how to use a rapier. And when you read some of the information that was in there, you can see there was a lot of discussion around how to grip the rapier, whether by the handle or through a loop and onto the ricasso, whether the sword was to be used for cutting and thrusting and how, whether the sword should be sharpened on both sides, only at the tip, or not at all, whether it could be used in close quarters, whether it could be used against a traditional sword. So obviously there's a tremendous amount of thinking that went into the use of a rapier, and it was obviously a very versatile weapon, but at the same time there were lots of swords which don't necessarily look very similar, which would still be classified as rapiers. I have two on the table, one here, which is very different than what I'm going to talk about today. Quite heavy, with a very thick, shorter blade, than this one, which I think fits the definition of a rapier very, very closely. Why there's lots of generalizations about a rapier, it's very hard to put your finger specifically on what it was. And there are lots of variations, both with the size and shape of the blade, both with the hilt and how it was designed. This one is swept hilt rapier, and I'll talk about what that means a little bit later, or whether there was a cup on the bottom or plates on the bottom, where they came from, where they were developed: Italy, France, Spain, Germany, England. When I close my eyes and think about what's a rapier, this is what I think about, and that's why I purchased this one. So let's talk a little bit about this rapier itself. The blade is hand-forged carbon steel. It actually is 37 inches long. The entire sword is just over 45 inches long. It has a 3-inch ricasso, and it's about an inch thick at the top and tapers to a very, very fine point. It is double-edged. It has a fuller running about 2/3 the length of the blade. It is extremely well balanced in your hand, whether you're holding with a traditional grip or whether you're looping your finger over the guard to hold it and use it that way. It flexes perfectly and always returns to true. It only has really what I would consider one slight imperfection, and that is actually the fuller. There are a number of bumps or notches in the fuller when you run your finger down it. You can feel them, you can also see them. But I would say for an entry-level item like this one, battle-ready entry-level item, it's really quite a small concern. Let's talk a little bit about the hilt, which I really think is the strength of this sword. It is about 7 inches long. It is a 3-ring swept hilt and you can see it sweeping up through here. The rings themselves get larger as you move up towards your hand. Bottom two are round, but they do come to a nice little ridge across the top. The third ring is flattened, and it runs up into the knuckle guard. The inner guard is rounded wire, and it too runs up into the knuckle guard. The quillions are square. They are thicker at the ends and narrow as they move in towards the center quillion. And the center quillion is quite well done. Runs to a little peak at the bottom and has 3 little cuts into it, which really create quite a nice aesthetic. The grip is wire-covered wood, and it has a very nice braid at both the top and the bottom, which really finishes off the grip quite nicely. The pommel is, as you see, quite large, and it is 6-sided faceted. It is extremely well done, and I think really makes the sword. The sword comes with a leather scabbard. It has very nice floral decorations at both ends on both sides. And when I display the sword actually in the scabbard, it looks really good. One slight problem, and I've had this with pretty well all my Windlass products, their scabbards don't tend to stay on the swords very easily. I have to put a little piece of felt or cloth at the end to create a little bit extra tension and hold the sword in. Let's move on to the Musketeer Gauche. Gauche is French for left hand. This is basically a parrying dagger, a very intricate one. This one at the front is a little bit simpler. It just has a ring that can be used with a nice bone handle. It's a little bit shorter. And these items were used pretty well from the middle of the Middle Ages right through to the early Renaissance. So there was numerous different shapes that you could see, different lengths, etc., as they went and evolved through that period of time. As I said, these were used for the defense. They were to be used with an offensive weapon, which was the rapier. They have very long blades and long, straight quinlins. A knuckle guard, it has a very nice etched cross with fleur-de-lis, very representative of the musketeers. And they were typically worn on your back, kind of out of the way a little bit. You were trying to show off your sword. A couple of big hilts sticking out probably wasn't the best of things to do. Let's talk a little bit about the blade. It is tempered steel. There are 3 sections to the blade. At the very top is a ricasso. It's quite thick, about 1/4 of an inch. It has 5 fullers cut into it. The fullers are a little uneven in terms of their length and depth. Not a huge problem. As I said, again, I'm using this mainly for display. You can't even really see it when it's up on the wall, but with close examination, you can see that. The second section has these cutouts and notches. These were used to catch the sword or deflect it, or cause a problem when someone was trying to thrust and stab at you. They're a little different in shape. One's cut a little bit deeper than the other. One's not as round as the other. Again, hard to see when it's up on the wall, but with close examination you can see that. And then the blade is flat, tapering to a very nice point. It has 13-inch quillion from side to side. The quillion actually has a number of different features. It's flat as you get closer to the center of the grip. As it comes out, it turns rounded. The knuckle guard, as you can see, is a piece of plate steel, and it is attached to the guard and enters into a slot that was made for it at the top of the sword. The grip is wood wrapped in wire, and it has a really nice feature. It has 4 little hollows that are cut into it. Very nice for holding and the grip, but really good looking. One small thing, they probably could have used 1 additional wrap of wire around it. You can just see a little bit of the wood of the grip at both ends. 1 wrap of wire would have taken care of that. Of course, if it would have had braids like on the rapier, it would have been perfect. And then it has a nice little knobbed pommel at the end. This sword is held together with a nut. It's not peened. And that's pretty typical, I would say, for an entry-level item like this. It does come with a scabbard. Has nice metal pieces at both ends. It is leather, no wood or anything inside, just leather. And it's a blue color. I think that is to go along with the Musketeer theme. You know, overall, this is really solidly put together. You know, even small things like the way the Knuckle Guard, it's riveted in place and comes through very nicely finished on the end. The blade actually has 2 notches that run up through into the guard as well. Very nicely finished on the bottom as well. And as I said, the only real concerns for me are a couple of cosmetic things, and they tend to stamp on here, Windlass, made in India. However, the first time you polish the item, the mark comes off. I'd really like to see them begin to add a maker's mark, because they do have quite a nice mark. I'd like to see them begin to put that maker's mark on there rather than the stamp with Made in India. But overall, looks great and is a tremendous example of a paring dagger from this time. The Windlass 17th century Italian rapier and the Musketeer Gauche, I think, are not a matching pair. I did that purposely. I wanted something that looked a little bit different. There is a matching sword for the dagger. Windlass has quite a few different rapiers and paring daggers, and I purchased these mainly for display, and they look great up on the wall. I think there are tremendous examples of 16th, 17th century rapier and paring dagger. I think the quality is quite good, and especially for an entry-level battle-ready item. You know, you can pay 4 or 5 times as much for an item, and they won't necessarily look much better. They may function much better, but they won't necessarily look much better. And I think they would be excellent additions to anyone's collection. Thank you very much.